Today I want to come to you and explain some things that we've been going through in our teachings and in our videos that will help you understand a little bit more about your journey in Christ. Most of us know that we come from God. Most of us know that God is love. But after that, it gets a little bit convoluted in the way we discern our relationship with Christ. Our understanding of scriptures, our understanding of doctrines and the kinds of things that we grow up in churches believing start to dilute that infatuation that we have with love, with God, who is love. In fact, in 1 John 4, he says, God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. That's about as clear as you can make it. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God. So when you think of love, you think of wholeness. So fear is not the opposite of love. It's the separation from love. Anger is not the opposite, it's the separation. So in our relationship with God, if we are not living in that wholeness of love, then we're in separation. So you think back to the times we go through our understanding in churches and how we're taught the scriptures. And I can't help but think about the mighty miracles of Moses. The first place in the scripture where you start to see the divine interaction on the earth with God's supernatural power. And those amazing miracles, I mean, if you look at the 10 plagues that were in Egypt before Pharaoh lets them leave Egypt, massive miracles, amazing things. So immediately, growing up in church, we start to understand that if we're going to demonstrate our connection with God, then it must have something to do with the physical environment. So automatically, we start separating ourselves from love. We start to see, okay, here's the physical world. We have this physical body, and we relate to the physical miracles that we read in the scriptures, the mighty men of God and all the supernatural things that happened in David's life, in Solomon, and all the prophets. We start focusing on the material realm. So our relationship with love is in separation, because now we're more attuned to the physical world and the physical environment than we are to that spiritual dimension of love. And then immediately we start to forget that we are spirit, that we're not body. And we think the spirit is in our body, but we're actually in the spirit. Our whole physical makeup is inside the spirit dimension. But because we choose to focus on the material world, we start to separate ourselves from that spiritual dimension. We start to separate ourselves from love. And John says, if God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God. So if we separate ourselves from that love, then that means we're focusing on the environment. Now, when we grow up in that kind of condition, we start to realize that we're playing by the rules of this dimension. And remember, I talk about the third dimension, how the cause and effect, duality, is the dimension that our physical nature is accustomed to and is conditioned into. And I use the term conditioning because it's very easy to be conditioned by the physical realm. All you need is an emotional experience connected with some kind of stimulation. And this is how people get conditioned. For example, something happens to you physically, you get a cut, you get some kind of pain, and you immediately focus on what created that condition. So you start getting conditioned to that stimulation, and the memories are etched inside of your brain, and all of a sudden you have this roadmap to a feeling. And pretty soon, you don't even need that condition to happen. You can create that chemistry inside of your body just by thought alone. So our bodies have become the mind of that experience. And all the energy that we trap inside of our body prevents our body from living in peace. And peace is the place where you have to be in order to experience love. You can't be in chaos. You can't be in fear. You can't be in doubt and anger and experience peace and love. So the mind of the body is focused on how to protect itself from any kind of feeling that is disruptive to the sensations of what we consider to be normal. For example, if your body gets a fever, or you get some kind of temperature in your body, which is a fever, your body is considered out of balance. And you recognize that you don't feel good. In reality, fever is part of the body's mechanism to produce stronger immunity. But because we're so sensitive to pain and discomfort, we automatically assume that there's something wrong with us. And the first thing that we've been conditioned to believe, if there's something physically wrong, you must go to a physician, so that physician can take away your pain. That's our conditioning. And that's about as simple as it gets when it comes to going down the road of wrong decisions, because all you need is a bad decision and a bad belief in a doctor, and your life can radically change. You'll be on medications, you'll have one chaotic event after another, and it'll take more medications to change that condition, and pretty soon your body is so out of balance that you even forget what wholeness feels like. And so many people go down that road. Because, why? Because they grow up believing that the physical environment is more important than the spiritual one. And we've said this over and over again so many times, that if we're not conscious of our spiritual nature, then we will be distracted, hypnotized, and subtly believe that what goes on in our physical environment is our reality. And then if you grow up in the church, you'll start to recall all those wonderful scriptures of all those supernatural events that happened out in the physical world. And you'll say, well, if I want to be close to God, I need to do something that is representative of that spiritual, supernatural realm. When the most supernatural realm you could live in is absolute peace and wholeness in God. That is supernatural. And that's the reality of the spiritual dimension. And you must get hold of what I'm telling you here, because later I'm going to talk to you about how you can really go into the depths of prayer from that position. But let's go a little further here. The spiritual plane is the plane of love. The physical plane, this three-dimensional plane, is the plane where we have to demonstrate love. And that can only come when we are in balance and in wholeness with God, and we are abiding in Him. So, how we respond to the physical environment demonstrates our spiritual grounding, where we are really focused. And if you spend time when you first wake up and think about what your thoughts are, start to just understand what kind of thoughts are coming into you first thing in the morning. Because the thoughts that come to you first thing are the primary foundation of your day. They're the primary foundation of what distracts your attention and captures your attention. So if you just pay attention to it, you don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to judge them. You don't have to do away with them. You just have to observe them. And the greater observer you become, the easier it will become later for those thoughts to just disappear. In other words, when I spend time observing what I don't want to think about, those thoughts all of a sudden dissipate. They're like a fog. They don't come around anymore. Why? Because the attention that you put on observation, on consciousness, on awareness is greater than those thoughts. Those thoughts don't have the same power as your physical observation. They come from an unconscious process inside of you that bubbles up, so to speak, when you're not being conscious. It's like water that's boiling. At first, when you put it on a burner, it's not boiling. But if it just sits there and you're not observing it, all of a sudden you see the bubbles coming up out of the pot. That's how thoughts bubble up inside of people. If they're not conscious of them, they will overtake you. And pretty soon, you'll start responding to those imaginary thoughts that have no substance. And it'll just take you down paths all day long and just destroy the energy that you've been given for that day. Remember, Jesus told his disciples in Matthew 6, "Therefore, do not worry saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For after all these things the Gentiles seek, for your heavenly Father knows what you need. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow." And this is the key. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. What does that mean? Tomorrow will worry about its own things. Jesus is saying something very critical here. He's saying that you are not of this dimension. This dimension operates in time and operates in shadows. So every day has 24 hours where it has already been played out in God's dimension, in the spiritual dimension. The physical realm has already been done in God's timetable. We're living in it in this physical dimension. We're living in this time zone right now to demonstrate the plane of love where we come from. Now, if your senses seduce you and make you believe that this physical realm is reality, then you are worrying about tomorrow. You're concerned about what you're going to wear. You're concerned about what's going to happen. And Jesus is saying, look, this has already been done in the scheme of things in God's dimension, in the spiritual realm, because it has no substance. Only the spiritual realm has substance. Listen to me. What's happening here is an illusion of your senses and beliefs. And the minute you separate from the spiritual dimension in that love, abiding in God, you can get caught up in all the drama, all the unbelief that's in this dimension. Because that's how people live. They live by the drama and all the anxiety and all of the addiction that this dimension gives them. You can partake in that. That's your will. That's your free will if you want to play in it. But your reality is to live in peace and in wholeness of love. And if you live like that, you're already living in the spiritual dimension. You don't have to worry about heaven. You're in it. You're living eternity. This physical body is going to drop off like the flowers Jesus spoke about in Matthew. They're just going to be tossed in the oven. That's a physical dimension that has organic matter that just keeps repeating itself. Rinse and repeat. You know those wash cycles you get into? That's what this dimension is. Over and over and over again. That's why Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun. So if you want to participate in this and live in that drama and physically be ill and not live in peace, then get caught up in it. And you will live it. Or you will think you're living it. You're really not, but you will think you are. But the real you is not there. The real you hears what I'm saying. The real you is not looking for the rush and addiction to this physical dimension. You understand that the peace of God is the reality of all spiritual beings, because that's why God created us, to demonstrate that love in this dimension. So I said earlier that our senses fool us into believing that what we see, feel, taste, and experience in this physical dimension is real. And that sensation makes us believe and surrender to the illusion of this dimension. So we start to manifest in our physical body the sensations of what we believe that we're experiencing. That is what our senses are here for, is to give us that three-dimensional, virtual reality experience. You see people that put their goggles on and they go into this invisible realm where they're experiencing this make-believe. That's how they're living their life. I don't know why they're wearing goggles, but that's how they're living their life to begin with. And now they want to make that the most important part of their life. They want to make this virtual reality the big deal. So what happens when we experience this dimension as reality? We start living in survival mode. Our senses believe that we are experiencing danger, or we're experiencing disease, or we're experiencing some kind of death, because all disease is a form of death physically. So when we live in survival, we're in the adrenaline is pumping through our bodies. It's taking all the energy that we're created with in our organs and in our surroundings. We've talked before about us being an electromagnetic field. All the energy that's inside of our spirit that is around our physical body either expands or it contracts. And it contracts when we're using all of that energy to survive. Mentally, we think we have to survive. So our electromagnetic field begins to shrink. And what happens is the organs inside the physical body begin to deteriorate. Not immediately, but over time. And what happens when those organs deteriorate is your body starts to manifest disease and sickness and shutdowns in organs of your body. So that's all because of separation from the wholeness. The minute you take that emotional charge of survival out of your priority, you're not looking for an enemy. You're not looking to judge your environment. You're not looking for this environment as reality. Your field begins to expand again, because God will use the energy that He's given you to create wholeness. That's what God does. His job in you is to create wholeness, because that's how His relationship with you is enhanced. So when you are not focused on the environment and on some make-believe threat in the environment, your body naturally goes back to homeostasis and starts to expand and create wholeness. And then it connects to more wholeness, because everything has a relationship in God's dimension. God's dimension is wholeness and fullness. So as we expand in our energy field, which is our spiritual dimension, we start connecting with the wholeness of everything God has created. And in that wholeness is how we interact with life, because we are life. Love is life. God is love. And life is wholeness. So, that is what healing is. People want to know what healing is. It's wholeness. And the more whole you are, the less sickness you have. So we're talking about wholeness, and Jesus came, as we know, to the house of Israel. So we know that these people, the Israelites, grew up in the miracles of Moses. So they were more identified with the physical than any other people on the planet, because that's all they were taught, is Moses was from God because of all the great miracles he did. So when Jesus came and said there's only 2 commandments, it blew their mind. So we look in Matthew 22, and we see that Jesus said to them, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets." So here's the Jews, the scribes and the Pharisees, totally immersed in all of the Old Testament scriptures of the 42 miracles of Moses and all the laws and all the prophetic words. And Jesus comes and says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And the second is love your neighbor as yourself. So think about that. Jesus is separating your soul, your mind, and your heart. He's making it very clear that these parts of your being is what gives us separation. He's showing you in these words that our senses, our thoughts, our heart, and how we believe has created this separation from God. And this separation from God is what gives us this false interpretation and false belief that somehow we are living according to the design of God. Because I mean, in churches, you're taught to judge what's right and what's wrong. You're taught to distinguish between evil and good. I mean, that's how you're brought up. You're good, they're bad, because they're not doing what you're doing. That kind of separation, that kind of mental discipline creates this separation and makes it greater and greater and greater. So that our fall from the plane of love and the wholeness with God becomes even more severe. And we have to understand how to navigate in this dimension in order to live as we think physically. Because all the scriptures are just so focused on this material world and how the supernatural power of God changed it. It needed something from out there to change what we're looking at. We needed the power of God to bring the frogs and the flies and all those miracles. That's the mentality church people are raised in. So when they read the scriptures, they're automatically filtering through that mentality. The mentality of we're right, they're wrong. We've got enemies and we need to judge them. So we need to bring down the evil. Jesus is making it clear. Your separation from God is in the way you feel, the way you think, and the way you believe. That's your separation. Why are you so convinced that your senses are the reality of the Spirit? Because they're not. All that does is just drive you more and more to be in control of your outer condition. You want to get success, so that means you want to get money. You want to have dominance. You want to be the best. Nothing wrong with wanting to be the best. But why do you want to be the best? Do you want to exalt yourself, which is more separation? Or do you want to live in that wholeness? You want to live in that peace? How many times did Jesus say, do not let your heart be troubled? Because he understood that your thoughts create this electrical force in your environment. And the way you feel create this magnetic force in the environment. If they are one, you're going to create this amazing magnetic, almost like a Wi-Fi signal that will draw to you everything you need without you having to go anywhere. Everything in this dimension is from the foundation of an atom, which is a piece of energy vibrating. That energy vibrates at a frequency. All frequencies carry information. So there's not anything in this dimension that's not carrying information. And it's there because the collective consciousness in this dimension has manifested what you're seeing in the physical. So you're not going to change the physical just because you want it to be different. The only way the physical changes is when your attention is not on it. Then it loses influence over your field, over your attention, wherever you're putting your energy. Back to the atom for a second. All material vibrates, like I said, at a frequency, at a certain frequency. Resonance is when your energy, your frequency, can vibrate at that material frequency vibrational level. In other words, let's say there's a tuning fork. It's tuned at C. And you come into the environment where the tuning fork is, and your body is vibrating at a frequency of C. And that tuning fork will begin to sound at that C. That's considered to be a resonating force. You are resonating at the same frequency of this tuning fork. So if your heart and mind and soul are one in frequency, wherever you go will be a resonating force of the frequency you carry. Follow me. So when you go into an environment that you don't judge and you're not attached to or attracted to, you're carrying a resonating force, divine, because it has expanded, and you start to change the outer world into the frequency you carry. So if you're carrying a resonating force of love, and that frequency is resonating in you, whatever material you enter into or you are interacting with will start to move at that frequency. And pretty soon, whatever was threatening from your former state of judgment will no longer be threatening. Whatever you used to run from and be afraid of will no longer create that energy inside of you, because you're carrying a field of love, resonating force of love. And that love will create that frequency wherever you go. That's what Jesus did. Wherever he went, he carried that divine frequency of love, and everything in the physical world was affected by it. That's how you change physical environment. Because what's going on now is people are so frightened and so fearful, their emotional state is out of balance and they're in separation from God. So when they go into a field, they react emotionally to that field, threatening or fearful, disease or whatever. Your emotions are reacting to it, and it's creating more imbalance inside of you, and that electromagnetic field around you is shrinking, taking that energy away from you. More and more people are sick because they have surrendered and believed that their condition is what they think it is, and they look for people to validate what they believe. If you don't get anything out of what I'm telling you right now, understand this. We are the authors of our life. We are the ones that create our condition. Nobody out there does it. At what point in your daily life do you surrender to the idea that somebody else caused you to feel a certain way? I ask myself that often. If I have an emotional response to something in the environment, somebody cuts me off in traffic, or I'm standing in a line, and immediately I feel these emotions inside of me rising up to say, I understand something right away. That person didn't do that to me. I allowed myself to judge a situation and feel a certain way to validate my authority or condition, superiority, whatever it is, ego, whatever. But when you can wire this into your mentality to understand nobody out there is creating your condition, but your life will change. And when you start to see you reacting emotionally to something in the environment, stop immediately and observe that. Because the minute you want to put the blame on somebody else, you're just going backwards in your understanding of your responsibility for that wholeness, that oneness that you're supposed to have in Christ. And it's a daily activity. Remember, Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow. Take care of today. Tomorrow has its problems for tomorrow. You got to be responsible for today. You only have right now. That's all you have. Now let's talk about prayer. Because prayer is something that we all need to understand at a different level. When we understand that we are carrying this frequency, this resonating frequency, and it's only resonating when your thoughts and your emotions are one. When how you think and how you feel are one, then you are resonating a frequency of wholeness, of oneness, of love in God. That is when you pray. You don't pray when you are thinking one thing and emotionally you're feeling something different. And 9 times out of 10, most people pray because in their mind they believe they need to pray for something to fulfill some kind of condition that's missing in their life. Most people have scoured the environment to see what they don't have. They watch all the commercials on TV to see what they don't have. When TV commercials come on and emotionally grab your attention, and they tell you, this guy is a certain age, and look how great he is, and how wonderful and conditioned he is, and then in the next frame they show you a person that might have had chicken pox, and they say, oh, this guy, if you've had chicken pox, you can have this disease. And immediately that attention that you've given emotionally to that commercial draws you in so that you can hear what's going to be the condition if somebody gets chicken pox or gets some kind of disease. What's going to happen? Because they're going to tell you, you're going to get this disease, but oh, by the way, we've got the perfect pharmaceutical drug that'll take care of it. So what they're doing is emotionally grabbing your attention and then frightening you to believe something that's not true, but because they've got your attention, then they can give you information that you will subconsciously program yourself to believe. That's how conditioning happens to you every day. If someone can grab your attention and then they can frighten you or anger you, they open up your emotions so that they can put information in that subconsciously programs you. You won't be consciously thinking about it when you get some kind of feeling, but then your subconscious will remind you, wait a minute, could that be that condition I just saw? Could that be something I'm going to get because I just heard about it? That's how physically people are conditioned. So when you want to pray, you have to understand that your emotional condition must be absolutely perfectly in line with your thinking. So when your thoughts are conscious of what Jesus says in Matthew, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. When you are in that oneness, when you are in love, when you are in wholeness of love, your heart and your mind are one. Then God will give you through your spirit exactly what it is He wants you to broadcast into the environment. That is prayer. You don't have to have some rote memory of some kind of physical condition or object or circumstance you want to pray for. You just need to be in wholeness, in oneness, and allow the Spirit of God to move through your being and give the environment the frequency spiritually that He's passing through you. You don't even have to be conscious of it. You just have to be conscious of your love for God in wholeness, in heart, soul, mind, and body. When you're in that state, then He can pray for what you don't even know needs to be released. And it'll go right through you. And all of a sudden, maybe not right away, but the environment will begin to demonstrate and show a change wherever you go. You've heard the word serendipity, synchronicities. Things will begin to come to you. You'll get phone calls. People will contact you. Why? Because God has drawn them like a magnet to exactly what He needs to have completed. And you will be absolutely used in that process to fulfill what God ordained before you were ever born. That's how you live supernaturally. That's the design of God. This physical body is just an experience on this plane of love. And when you operate in that design and you understand that condition, you'll be too busy staying in that oneness to be concerned about anything in the environment. If everything you need will just come to you. Everything you possibly could want will come to you. And here's the most important thing I want you to understand. When you emotionally can feel what it is that you physically want, you don't have to go anywhere to get it. See, in this physical dimension, you move through time. You play the game of matter to matter. You physically have to do something. You physically have to go somewhere. You physically have to work. You have to use money. You have to use... That takes time. The prayer that I just described to you collapses time. That collapses time and makes you a vortex from the spirit realm to come into the physical realm. That is the supernatural, and that is how we are designed to operate in this physical world. And trust me, the more you start paying attention to the thoughts you don't want, the more you start becoming one with your emotional nature, because the magnetic force is much stronger. So when you can get your thoughts in oneness, in resonance with your heart, then you are going to be in a much greater position of bringing into your physical realm everything God has designed before time. Because that's where we were created, outside of time, outside of space. Jesus says over and over again, guard your heart, guard your heart. John 14, He says, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give it to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. That's the oneness, that's the wholeness. Jesus carried wholeness wherever He went. His resonating force of love changed the physical environment. It wasn't the miracles of Moses. Although the miracles took place, that was a sidebar to what God was carrying through this planet. And what He did by collapsing all time and space in His resurrection was give you and me the opportunity to live like that. He changed the world forever because what He came up out of the grave with transformed this dimension. So we were no longer forced to live where God had to intervene like He did in the Moses time. Now we carry that supernatural oneness of love. And that's what I want to challenge you with today. I want you to understand that you are responsible for your condition. Nobody around you, nobody coming into the world will change that. You are responsible. And the more conscious you are of your thoughts and emotions, the greater your resonating power will be in the earth today. So until next time, I love you and God bless you.